And you know, one of the things that people are taught as evidence of evolution among living things, this hasn't got to do with changes in living things, but it's another evidence that's often used, is the evidence from similarity, you know. The same sort of pattern is used in the forelimbs of these very, very different creatures. It's called the pentadactyl limb pattern. And, you know, if you look closely, you can see the incredible similarities. But, you know, let's say this up front. That is consistent with, and therefore it is evidence for, the idea that these came from a common designer. But if you leave it at that and you don't teach children how to think, what they think they've seen is proof of a common designer, when in fact it is also evidence for, because it is consistent with did I say common designer? I meant common ancestor, coming from the same ancestor that had that pattern, but it's also evidence for a common designer, the same designer using the same basic pattern. Well, why is that? People say, well, why would God make that same pattern? Well, maybe because it makes good engineering sense. Because when you think about it, that same pattern is also found in our hind limb. And if we take that argument of the evolutionist that that means a common ancestor, then that would argue that we all came from an ancestor that only had forelimbs or only had hind limbs, which of course is ridiculous and nobody believes that. You know, to simplify the argument further, many of you will know that the earlier Porsches had air-cooled, horizontally opposed rear engines, and that the Volkswagen Beetle used to have an air-cooled, horizontally opposed rear engine. So tremendously similar vehicles. What was the reason for the similarity? The reason was that they had the same designer. Can anyone tell me who it was? Actually, you pronounce it Porsche, Ferdinand Porsche, but everybody says Porsche, so that'll do. But the same man designed it, so he used the same basic principles.